Hello, welcome to 6 Feet Unfiltered.
I'm Chloe.
I'm Courtney.
Today we are diving into 6 Feet Under, Season 1, Episode 9, Life's Too Short. And this one is heavy. We open with one of the most devastating deaths of the series so far as Gabe's, yes, that Gabe, 6-year-old brother Anthony accidentally shoots himself, shattering what little stability Gabe has left. As grief and guilt consume him, we see Claire caught between concern and caution. Well, Gabe's mother spirals and his estranged father returns with rage instead of remorse. Actually, it's not Gabe's father. It's just Anthony's father. But Gabe's former stepfather, I guess. Meanwhile, Nate gets a harsh reality check on the business of death. David takes a wild detour into clubbing and ecstasy, and Ruth embarks on a camping trip that turns into a full-blown psychedelic journey, complete with a surprise visit from Nathaniel. This episode is all about loss, regret, and the ways we try and often fail to hold it together when tragedy strikes. Let's get into it.
Oh my God. So the episode opens with the tragedy so sudden and senseless, it barely feels real until it is. 6-year-old Anthony is just a kid looking for something to do, wandering around his mother's room while his older brother Gabe and a friend are getting high in the next room. But curiosity turns fatal when Anthony finds a gun. A single gunshot shatters the haze of teenage recklessness, leaving Gabe and his friend frozen in horror. The innocence of childhood is gone in an instant, replaced by the unbearable weight of loss and guilt. It is a devastating moment that sets the tone for this entire episode, where grief, blame, and the brutal finality of death collide. I just could not. I was a puddle. I literally, when I turned it on and I saw the kid in the episode, I knew, because Chloe had called me the night before and she's like, "Did you watch the episode yet?" And I was like, "Nope." And she goes, "It's going to be very triggering, so beware." And so I told Rob, I was like, well, either a kid dies or a kid dies.
Yeah.
And then I saw the kid and I was like, oh my God, I remember this. And it is so interesting. There's a lot of thoughts that I had throughout the episode that we'll get into, because there was things that I had brought into like today's world that are just freaking crazy.
This is a really good episode to highlight how you see things, not even, well, I was going to say how you see things differently at different ages, but more so just the different impact that different things have on you. Because I know when I watched this episode for the first time, what was it, like 10 years ago, or was around the time we both first watched, and this one gutted me then, and it still does, but it's just such a different lens now, especially like for you, I'm sure, having children of your own. Just, it wrecked me. And I am going to forewarn at this point, I have a heavy text load of notes because I recorded verbally my notes when I was washing my hair in the shower. So it's very verbose, but I'm going to just plug through and
we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Anyway,
throw it at us.
So I'm going to do my best. I'm sorry if it sounds weird because that's how I took notes this time, but well, only for the first like chunk. But anyway, I wrote really heavy death scene. Like I said, I remember this one really fucking me up when I first watched it a long time ago. And even though I knew what was coming when I watched it this time, it's still so heavy and so hard to watch. Every little thing about it. And one detail from the death scene that I wanted to note was with Gabe, when he goes into his little brother's room to tell him to go play in mom's room. And then they're being dicks to each other, and the little kid is not being nice either. He's like, "You suck," and storms out. And when he leaves the room and Gabe's douchebag friend Andy comes in, they close the door and sit down to smoke whatever drugs Andy brought over. And Gabe says something like, "Kid's already got a major attitude. He's only 6 and he's already hard ass," or something like that. And I just thought, and this could also be me like preemptively trying to protect Gabe in my brain because I knew what was going to happen. But I had the thought that maybe he almost was saying that in an endearing way, kind of like he's such a hard ass or whatever. But coming from Gabe, I feel like that's almost kind of a compliment. You know what I mean? Because that's how like kind of he acts. I don't know. And it feels like almost an endearing thing in a way for him to say. So I feel like there's an undertone of or layer of them showing us, and again, this might just be
It's in
me
there for a reason.
in my head too much, but showing us that Gabe really does have a good heart and did care a lot for his younger brother.
Which we very much find out.
Yes, for sure. And another thing that highlighted this too was when Andy asked Gabe if he wanted to go to some launch party or some kind of music thing at some place, and Gabe blew him off and said something like, there's always just a bunch of tweakers there or something like that. And Andy was really playing it up, and he's like, it's going to be at Sing Sing or whatever, making it sound like this is something
Place to be.
yeah, like that Gabe would probably typically be interested in going to. And Gabe is just basically blowing him off and saying, no, fuck that. And when he says it's at Sing Sing, Gabe's like, oh, cool, Asian tweakers or whatever, which is racist. But no matter what this kid says, it's clear that Gabe doesn't want to do anything. And I think the subliminal message here is that he normally would be interested in doing these things, hence why Andy is asking him and is weirded out that he doesn't want to. But the reason why he's not interested is because he is there caring for his little brother.
Yep.
And his mom is working or whatever she's doing. And he knows that even though they obviously have this fucked up, unsafe home environment, especially for the little boy, he still has a sense of love and care and responsibility for that little boy, for his little brother. So he has to stay home and take care of him. And that's why he really can't go with his friend. And I don't know, I feel like that is just a little attribute towards Gabe's heart and his character. Also fucked up about the death scene. I think this is my last long-winded thing about this death scene, but holy fuck, if Gabe wasn't fucked up before, he's so fucked now. Like, can you even imagine going through that?
I noticed and noted that his character, his acting was impeccable.
Yes.
Yeah.
You said that about him before when he found the foot in the locker.
Yes, I did. I don't know why that is so
Eric Balfour is the
he's
actor's
so
name.
good. And like, I don't know how, I'm not an actor. I don't know how hard of a scene that would have been to do, but to portray the way that if you look at his facial structure, it literally looks traumatized, and he walked in on that.
Yeah.
Let's be very plain. His brother's body was still warm.
Right. Yeah.
Just the blood had to have been.
Yeah. And they mention in the episode that he shot himself in the head. It wasn't just like, yeah. So really fucked up. And so I can't even find words.
The friend.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, I don't know.
I went down a weird path with this too, exactly what you're saying. So when Andy was trying to leave, he's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. And at first in my head, I was like, what the fuck? Fuck you. But then he was like, I gotta get this shit out of here, talking about the drugs. So he really did need to get those drugs out of there. Otherwise, things could have been worse for them, which honestly, they probably should have gotten caught with that. But just thinking about it from their perspective, I guess.
I hadn't even thought about that until you just said that now, actually. Maybe it's because weed is legal and
Well, and I feel this is another aspect too, where I remember things that happen later in the series that make me wonder if this wasn't just weed. I mean, it sounded the way they described it like that's all it was in this episode, but there's other weird things. And I feel like they obviously should not have been doing any kind of illegal drugs, especially while Gabe is responsible for watching his little brother. But that was the reality. And that's the reality for a lot of I'm not condoning it, but that is real life. So I was thinking about that they would have gotten into more trouble if they didn't get the drugs out of there. And I think it was a weird path I went down in my head because I think I wanted, like I said, to protect Gabe in that moment. So I was thinking, I don't want him to get into any more trouble than he already is going to be. Well, not necessarily, I mean, yeah, kind of trouble, but the guilt and everything. And he is just completely fucked in the head for the rest of his life now. And we've seen through these subliminal things that I've explained already that he really does love his little brother and cares about him. So I don't want more pain for him in this moment. So I found myself when Andy was like, I got to get this shit out of here. I was just like, okay, yeah, you actually do. Like, get that the fuck out of here because I just didn't want to see it get worse I don't give a fuck about Andy. He sucks. But Gabe and the whole situation, I don't know, that as I'm saying it, I can totally understand how that could be misconstrued as me, like, I don't know. I said I wanted to protect him. I don't, obviously it's so horrible that this little kid died, but it's like, I just also feel so horrific for Gabe because it was such a brutal thing to watch. And I can't imagine. I just wanted to take that away, like take the whole situation away. It was just so, it's also the first death scene that we've seen that is not an adult, and probably one of the only ones. And yeah, just was really shocking and hard. So those were just some thoughts that I had while watching that again.
And sitting here now watching this in 2025, the leading cause of death in America on children is guns. So that, like, knowing that, and obviously I'm not a take the guns away kind of a person at all. We grew up in Hibbing, Minnesota. We've had guns.
I don't give a fuck. You can take the guns away.
I just want, we don't even have to go down that rabbit hole because I am not
I hear you.
a freak about that. I do think that there needs to be so much more education around this. That gun should not have been in any way
control. We need gun control.
Oh, so much gun control. And I think it starts in our homes too. Like, we have to completely. There shouldn't have been a loaded gun.
No. And there's so many factors too.
And yes, this was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, the time and their socioeconomic status, just awareness, education. We don't know many details about Gabe's mom, but it was pretty apparent that she has some probably substance abuse issues and works a lot or whatever it is. So I think all of those added in, but that's just like same thing that we see today. Of course, it can happen to anyone, but the risk factors go. Yeah, we could talk about that forever.
Yeah, we could do a whole season on this.
Just horrific. Protect kids, not guns. Put that on my fucking gravestone.
Really, truly. It was just a lot to unpack. It was very a heavy,
very hard one. Yeah. Rough. And we're so used to these like semi-comical death scenes.
Yeah. From like episode 1. Right. And
yeah. But 6 Feet Under for you. It's real.
You know what I also was thinking too? I'm so sorry. This is taking a long time in the beginning. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this might have been the first time that they start the episode with people we already know. So I got confused for a second.
Oh, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, you're probably right. I'm trying to go back through in my head
on the writer side
there
of
were
things.
Any.
I was like, did I start this in the middle of the episode? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Right?
Very, I mean,
it kind of
morbid but creative on the writing end, and a good way to kind of pull the viewer in, I think.
Yeah, it was weird.
Ugh. Yeah. Okay. So the episode after the death scene starts where Nate and David are talking in the prep room, and David is in a bad mood again about how much work he has on his plate now that Federico is gone. And he's pissed at Nate for flunking the funeral director's license exam. And Nate gets mad at David for making him feel even worse about it.
And then David says, I don't care about your feelings. And Nate says, bullshit. You like it when I feel bad because misery loves company. And I think, especially in the role of siblings, that is absolutely accurate. And I loved that he not only recognized it, but called him out. And I don't think David said anything. I think he just...
Yeah, I don't even think David disagrees necessarily. No. It is so true. And I really liked that line too. It was pretty articulate of Nate. I feel like even though he's still being combative, he's kind of choosing to engage a little bit more instead of just running away, which I appreciate.
He's putting some skin in the game here.
Yeah. So then the tension between Nate and David kind of dissipates for a moment when Nate asks how the person David was working on had died. And David explains that he died of a heart attack. And Nate is like looking at the body and he goes, is his nose supposed to look like that? Which raises the tension again. And David responds, of course not. Then they get into another argument.
Because David's trying to do Federico's work.
Yes, he's trying.
So he's getting...
And he's notably, they make it very clear throughout
he's
the
not
series
nearly
that
as good.
He's not he's very good at embalming and all the other stuff, but not the cosmetic aspect. That was what Rika was very gifted in. So, another thing, I'm glad I just thought of this. I was going to put it in here, but I forgot. Since we posted on Reddit about our podcast a few times, so when I go on Reddit, sometimes it's like my nightly when I'm scrolling before I fall asleep. I love just going on Reddit because I can just like read myself to sleep with ridiculous fucking shit that people post on there. But I love it. Please don't stop posting ridiculous shit. But the algorithm on the Reddit that I made for our podcast to post our podcast on is feeding me all this types of topics about like death and dying and funeral homes and whatever, because I am only in the 6 feet under, you know what I mean? So I will sometimes just, when I open Reddit, it will be on that account, and then I'll start looking at all that stuff. And there's so many people who post in, I think the subreddit is called like Ask a Funeral Director or something along those lines. And so many people, I swear, like every time I go on there, there's a different person asking, which it's so interesting to see that I would have never even dreamed that there was a community out there, but it's so good to know that there is, that where you can ask these questions. But people will ask questions about their loved ones and what they looked like when they died, and like, is this normal? Like, did the funeral home fuck up? Should they have done this? Like things.
I need to get on this Reddit thread.
It's very interesting. And so many times people will say things about their loved one's nose because I bet that's probably one of the first things that starts to, I don't know,
Interesting.
decay or decompose. But
what do they say?
Well,
What was the consensus?
I don't remember there's been multiple, so it's different on every one, but people will comment, and there's a lot of funeral directors or whatever it is that you call people who do that on there, who will explain, like, I remember specifically one commenting, if you put a little bit of cotton in the nostril, it can help, or like things.
Oh,
so
because
like,
I bet it like, so imagine my
in.
nose. Oh my God. You better you're going to need a whole sock.
Yeah. But anyway, I thought of that, and it was just an interesting tidbit that scene made me think of.
I also love how Nate says, I just want to point out that you are choosing to be the victim here. And okay, I liked that it spoke to me because I have been obsessively, it's like manifesting, like you learn something about yourself, or like you overcome something in your own body or personality, and you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing this theme.
Synchronicities.
Yes. And I'm like, when Nate said that to David, I was like, there's so many people that I want to say that to.
Yeah.
But truly, when some people just choose to be the victim, it seems easier, but it's so much better on the other side of that mentality. Because that mentality of choosing to be the victim is exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And it is a choice. Like, even when you are truly the victim, you can choose to not be the victim. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I was sexually assaulted, when I was 2000, it was probably when I started watching this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It probably was, actually. It was in that. I know I was living in that house. But anyways, I remember I went through all of these things in my head, and I decided I didn't want to be like a victim. That wasn't like my name, or that wasn't it. I wanted to think of it as,
or like, give the power to somebody else.
Yes. I wanted to take back my own power and basically be
not saying that sexual assault survivors are choosing to be victims.
No. Oh my God. Did I
no, I
insinuate
just
that? Okay.
Clarify that's
that.
not what
Thank
you're
you.
saying.
Not even a little bit. I am a huge advocate for.
Right. You're speaking to the reclaiming your power.
Yes. Which not everybody gets to that point either.
I hear you.
And so when he said that, all I could think of was like, oh my God, it's so much better on this side. Nate's right. Like, come on, David.
Right. Yeah. I was glad he said that too. It was a good line.
It was very impactful.
Yeah. And I made my last note about this scene. Nate's hair is ridiculous.
I thought the same thing.
He looks like fucking Werewolf on Campus or some shit.
I thought he looked
It's like
Kevin Bacon for a minute.
Okay, I could kind of see that. They do kind of resemble each other.
There was a movie that Kevin Bacon did, and he had some crazy, like, weird-ass hair.
Then Nate and David's conversation is interrupted because the doorbell rings, and when they go upstairs to answer the doorbell, Kurt is upstairs teaching a ballroom dancing lesson, and David greets Kurt and then goes to answer the door, and Nate says to David, okay, if you haven't slept with that guy yet, would you start? Because I think it would do you a world of good, which they have.
And it's clearly not doing him a world of good.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's helping.
I do think I think ultimately it's good, but that was just another funny Nate moment. And I do like that he
can joke about it.
Yeah, it's such a brotherly vibe that they can go from being at each other's throats.
Yes. That's another thing we have to take into consideration. These aren't like two friends fighting. They're
right.
It's like me and my sister. You can't.
Yeah. I was just thinking of that.
Specifically me and Callie.
Yes.
We were assholes to each other.
Yeah. But it's like you just flip the switch.
Yes.
And it's not like when you are fighting with a friend where it's like weird, for a while. Like it's just.
Yeah, you don't know what to, like you walk into the. Yeah, I don't even know what I was about to say. You walk into the kitchen and was the fridge still in there?
Yeah. Yes. So then we see Ruth getting dressed in her bedroom, and she doesn't realize that Hiram is sitting on the bed watching her. She sees him in the mirror and imagines that she is actually seeing Nathaniel. And she gets kind of spooked and turns around. And that would be so weird, though, to see another man sitting in the same spot that your husband had sat a million times. So I really like that they put that part in there because I think it was, we know that when we see Nathaniel, it's always kind of like in that person who is seeing him, like their imagination or whatever. But I feel like this is almost on another level that it's, I don't know.
More intimate though.
Yeah, because it was like literally his energy was probably like still there. And she's just so used to looking in that mirror, getting dressed and seeing Nathaniel sitting on the bed like that 100 million times. But it's Hiram, and how weird would that be to have another man sitting in the same spot? Mm-hmm. So crazy.
Mm-hmm. Like, we fucked right there.
Right. And yeah, just so many layers to that.
He's probably sitting on a cum spot.
Oh, poor Hiram. But yeah, probably.
With a smile, a shit-eating grin on his face.
Were they having, yeah. You think Nathaniel and Ruth were still having sex when he died?
I don't know.
I don't either. I feel like maybe it was routine, but not like real sex, like connecting sex.
Maybe not, because it seems like that's what she's longing for is some sort of intimacy.
Yeah. And they were, well, we know she was getting that elsewhere.
She was cheating, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But also.
To be a real old cub spot.
Yeah, yeah. So I also wanted to note here that Ruth is wearing a super fucking hideous dress. And I also love how cute Hiram is. As always, Ruth is like, don't watch me. And he's like, I can't help it. You're so beautiful.
Oh, I know.
Like, oh my God, I love him. And Ruth, he says that. And she was like, oh, for heaven's sake. I love how.
Who does she remind me of? Somebody. I'll figure it out.
So then Hiram tells Ruth that he wants to go camping with her again. And Ruth says she can't just get up and leave whenever she wants anymore because she has a job now. And Hiram says, it's our anniversary tomorrow. And Ruth goes, we don't have anniversaries. I never agreed to anniversaries. Poor Hiram. But also, I get that. It's a little much too soon. Nathaniel literally just passed away. And Ruth.
Yes, that is interesting.
Yeah. I get Hiram loves her, and I understand wanting to celebrate the anniversary with somebody that you love. But at the same time, maybe just wait a little.
Yeah, you can't make the public anniversary. When it's only been like 3 days since the husband died.
That's a good point. That's probably the main thing that she's not wanting to confront with that, or why she's so averted to it.
Even if it's not going to be public, she doesn't want it to be
acknowledged. Yeah. But ultimately, she does agree to see if she can get work off to go camping with him. Then we see Gabe and his mom sitting down with Nate and David doing the intake for Gabe's little brother, Anthony. Super heart-wrenching, as always, to see a mother grieving. And also an added layer, since we already know Gabe, and he has not been shown in the best light so far. So it was interesting to just see him from a different perspective and more of the supportive role.
Yeah.
And Gabe's mom is in shock, and Gabe kind of has to do most of the legwork here in this interaction. And Nate tries to convince the mom to do an open casket to say goodbye to Anthony. And David gets pissed about that later because Nate isn't considering that the boy shot himself in the head. So it would be a reconstruction that they're not currently capable of without Federico.
And talking about the funeral and having that closed casket, the mom says, no, I don't want to see him.
Yeah, I
And
can't see him in a
just,
box.
yeah, yes, it was, I
Yeah.
don't blame her. I also don't blame Nate for mentioning that though, because I do
Right.
think
He's
that's something that you
trying.
want to maybe really consider, because you can't just come back and say,
Right. Yeah. He just wasn't thinking it fully through
yeah,
in this moment. And I also just want to throw in here where I feel like as we're talking about this death scene, it's so heavy and we have talked about it a lot. But like as we're sitting here and as I'm listening to you talk about it, there's so much I want to say, but I just can't. I don't have the words. It's not that we're trying to skim over it. It's just so brutal. I literally don't even have words to really get into it. So, yeah. As the Demuses are walking out, they walk past Kurt and he asks David what happened. And David tells Kurt how the boy died. And as Gabe is leaving, Claire sees him and asks Nate what he was doing there. And then she runs out to Gabe after Nate tells her what had happened. And they didn't really get to talk for a long time because Gabe's mom was waiting for him. But that was a very intense, deep moment for those two in their relationship. I feel like her just running out there to see him showed him that she cares and she didn't really know what to say, but that's okay in that moment.
the actions were speaking much louder.
Yeah, I think that meant a lot to him to see that she cared enough just to come in and see him.
Yeah, I mean, it's
See, there's no words. Then Nate and David are having an interaction in the kitchen, and this is where we see David get pissed at Nate for suggesting the viewing for Anthony. David says it's not our job to force someone to do something that they're not ready to do because we think it's the right thing, because it will make us feel better.
I didn't believe that he actually meant that either.
I think David, I didn't pick up on this right away, but as the episode carries on and then looking back at it now, I think he was having a really hard time with this death too, because he was having to do most of the work and he's not used to having to do 100% of the work on all the bodies. And he's having to spend a lot more time in these, intimate settings preparing the bodies. And this is such a hard death. I think that was really getting to him and making him even more irritable. It wasn't just your run of the mill, what they're used to. Like a child's death is so much more horrific than anything else that you could ever imagine. I think that's weighing on him. Same thing you said. I'm fucking dying at Ruth, working at the flower shop, and this guy is in there and he's like, what would you get for someone that you're going to ask to marry? And Ruth says, oh, roses would be the perfect choice, because he was asking about roses or something. And then he goes, but then she turned out to be a cheating coward and ran off with some shithead she met at traffic school. What color would you get a coward? And Ruth's like, yellow. And he says, okay, 12 dozen, which by the way, 12 dozen.
That's
what
a
the
lot
fuck?
of roses.
It's like 144 roses.
Oh, that we just did math. Was that a binomial?
Was that correct?
Yeah, 12 times 12.
That's shocking. I don't know my times tables. I don't know how I just pulled that out of my ass. But anyway, he says, okay, 12 dozen roses sent to this address, please. And Ruth's like,
Would you like a card?
yeah, what would you like the card to say? And he says, fuck you, cunt. And Ruth's face, she's just trying to make a sale, but she's so uncomfortable. It is so funny. A really great way for them to lighten the mood. They really needed this comedic relief in here. And she looks at him and she's like, I think it would be more personal if you write that. And he just grabs it and starts writing it down. I was literally laughing out loud in the shower when I was washing my
I love it too, because it shows that Ruth is really passionate about her job, that she would what's his name?
Nikolai.
Would Nikolai have had the conversation of the red roses? You guys, you must do the red. Yeah. Oh, she the cunt? You must do the yellow. Like, he would not have had that conversation.
No.
And she was just, in it.
Yes. She's giving it her all, even though she's so uncomfortable with the situation. Then we see Ruth approach Nikolai to tell him that she's taking the next couple of days off because she made plans with a friend. And Nikolai asks if it's the man that drives the funny little car. And Nikolai laughs at her and she gets annoyed, and he tells her she can take the days off while still teasing her. And she has a line in there and she's like, it's an electric car and it's very good for the environment. Which,
that is funny.
If I'm thinking, okay, on our Instagram, I follow all of the actors that have, literally no one in 6 Feet Under has Instagram. Not no one, but most of the main characters don't. Anyway, Ed
That's odd.
Begley Jr. is a climate activist, intense, and so is his daughter. And that is a funny connection because I wonder if they pulled in
Weird.
real things about the person for the, you know what I mean? Kind
We'll
of
have to
like what we
check.
said, or what I said I saw in that YouTube video about Alan Ball rewriting the
For
character of
Federico.
Rico. Super interesting. Then Nate walks into Brenda's house and is talking to her while she's in another room about how horrible his day was. He failed his test, he fucked up the intake meeting, and he had to pick up the 6-year-old boy's body from the morgue. And he's talking out loud while she's in the other room still, and he's sitting down in a chair, and he goes, sometimes I feel like I made this decision for all the wrong reasons, and now it's too late. And then Billy comes up behind him and starts rubbing his shoulders, and Nate assumes it's Brenda until Billy says, it's never too late. And Nate gets up and he's like, Jesus, Billy. He's clearly irritated. He's like, what, do you live here now?
Well, we haven't seen Billy since the freak out moment.
Since Nate freaked out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an odd.
Yeah, I wonder
Have
if
we
they have
talked
had
about that? Like-
interactions. Well, Brenda and Nate made up. But yeah, you're right. We haven't seen any interaction with Billy and him.
That's
But
all
yeah.
I had for Billy was ugh.
Yes, that whole dynamic between Nate and Brenda and Billy while they're at Brenda's house and the conversation they're having. So they're discussing the death of Anthony, and fuck Billy for his whole spiel here, but he's trying to be like, oh, you know, some cultures do this and this when kids die. Like they find ways to like be happy or whatever, giving all these different weird, I don't know, sociological facts about different cultures.
Weird that he even is doing any of that research. That to me screams psycho.
Yeah. And he is fitting.
Everybody just sits there and allows the psycho to be.
Yeah. Brenda definitely enables him. Yeah, it was really gross, but he's trying to, I don't know, kind of show that he knows more. And honestly, the scene started out a little bit heartwarming to me. I was like, oh, I love this. Nate's opening up and Billy's there, and maybe they can actually like build a relationship before the dick measuring started.
Yes.
But Billy gets jealous because he sees Brenda supporting Nate and connecting with him, and she like reaches over and touches him and is like, oh, you poor thing. And while he's sharing his trauma from the day of having to pick up the 6-year-old at the morgue, etc. And then fast forward, like I said, Billy and Nate start getting into it because Billy is insinuating that Nate's an amateur or something because he doesn't know all this crazy shit about other cultures and what they do when kids die or whatever.
Yeah. So my notes are a little more concisely short, but it felt as though I liked what you were saying about Billy trying to one up him. I didn't feel that right away. Like by the end of the conversation I did, I was thinking Billy was trying to
Connect.
make his
Diminish Nate's pain.
diminish his like information, like the fact that Billy could easily go and get all of this information and Nate still didn't pass his director license or whatever. It was more of like oh please, that's nothing.
Look at all the things I know and you still can't even pass your
and I
test.
just did all this
Right.
this searching.
Yeah.
And it screamed yuck to me big time, and I think that's consensus across the board.
So
Billy looked straight at Nate and said, what a man does is who he is, which I don't like that at all, because people have different, you could be a different person inside your workspace than you are outside of your workspace. They don't have to all mesh together. They can coexist. I didn't like that. And it didn't seem like it was trying to be said in a philosophical way. It was more of a, that's all you are, is a, ugh.
And you're not even that because you don't know.
And you're not even.
But he says,
yeah, tell us the word again.
then Nate's like, what, you're saying I'm an amateur? And Billy goes, I prefer the term dilettante. Is it dilettante or dilettante?
I don't know. I wrote, what the fuck is it?
I had never heard that word before either. But we looked it up, and it means a person who cultivates an area of interest, such as the arts, without real commitment or knowledge. So basically,
An amateur.
Synonymous with amateur. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So there is a really funny moment in there where Billy is being his dick self, and then he says to Nate, you know? And Nate looks at him, and he's just like, yeah.
It was just over it.
Yes. Like, so he did such a good job.
Sometimes I saw this meme one time, and it was like, arguing with a dumb person, it goes like this. They say 2 + 2 is 5, and you say, yeah, right, because you got to carry the one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know, like,
that's
you
what
just,
Nate was doing here.
if you
He was
can't
just
beat 'em, join 'em.
giving, yeah, exactly. Super funny though, that made me laugh. But then Nate and Billy are going back and forth and they're kind of arguing about whether it's relevant to what he experienced, the shit that Billy was saying. And Nate's like, that's not going to help me cope with a 6-year-old's death. He shot himself in the head. That's not nature. And then Brenda interrupts them, and holy shit, this is a Queen Brenda moment. And I love her for this. But she basically says, you know, there's a word for if you lose a parent, then you're an orphan. You lose a spouse, you're a widow. But what's the word for when a parent loses their child? I guess that's just too fucking awful to even have a word for. And basically, I interpreted that as saying, yeah, both of you shut the fuck up, because whatever you're talking about, none of what either of you are saying is comparable to the pain that this little boy's parents are feeling. And you're taking this to a level of almost disrespect for arguing over the name of this little deceased boy. And I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just so good the way that she said that without saying it. And then they both got it too. They both shut up and they looked at each other, and she essentially was just saying, both of you shut the fuck up because you're being dicks. Obviously more complex than that, but that was really, really intense and I loved it. And also, I wanted to note, a little bit of a spoiler alert, but Brenda saying the line about losing a child being too awful to have a word for it is some dark foreshadowing. You can almost see it in her eyes when she says it, and they linger on her, and she kind of like looks down and she's really being contemplative of it. Never mind. You don't remember. I'm just going to zoom right past that. Just forget about it.
Oh
Erase
my
your mind.
God. Okay.
David's at a rave with Kurt, and Kurt gives him ecstasy, and David has a blast, and Kurt is sweet and makes sure that David drinks a lot of water, and David is acting like a goof. It was fun.
I know. All I put was, oh my God, it makes you want to try it.
Yeah.
It looked like so much. I've never tried ecstasy, but I have a note in here later about something else.
Yes, I saw it. Okay, yeah. I was
Have you tried it?
I knew you were going to ask me that. That's what I was just going to say. In the interest of remaining honest and employed, I will not answer your question.
So you're pleading the fifth.
But yeah, I guess I don't know for sure because it wasn't called that, but I think it's the same thing. But anyway.
What? Crank?
No.
I don't even know. I'm such a loser.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
So David is hung over the next morning.
You guys later.
And not just normal hungover, like ecstasy hungover, and he's doing an intake, leaving Nate to take the reins. Then we see Gabe's friend Andy in the cafeteria at school saying to his friends at the lunch table that it was a good thing he was there so he could trash the weed.
Okay, so then we're getting to that. Now that I'm reading my notes and you talking about, oh, it was a good thing that they did hide the weed, I still at this point thought that was crazy. Remember, I was like, yeah, that's so dumb. So my note was Andy sitting here talking about how much worse it would have been if the police found the weed. And that is not where my mind went. I literally was thinking, what the fuck? I get that he's probably grieving too and trying to make sense of the things that he saw. He saw it too. He almost threw up and just trying to be cool. I don't know. It was just so frustrating that was all he could think about was the police coming as if they were doing some crime.
Right. And it was true that it would have been worse for them if they would have not gotten rid of the weed. But at the same time,
I don't even think it would have mattered. I mean, there's nothing worse than what just happened.
No, there's not. But I was going to say, I think Andy is using that like as a scapegoat too. He wanted to get the fuck out of there, obviously. But the only thing I meant by like bringing that up was that I was glad that Gabe didn't have. I don't care about Andy, but that Gabe didn't have that as well added on to it. I guess. No,
I get that. And when you brought it up, I was like, oh, that does make a lot of sense. But at this moment, as I was writing this, I'm like, get out of here.
And that's valid too, because
he did bragging about it at the cafeteria. Like, yeah.
So then Claire approaches him and asks about Gabe, and he says he's okay, I guess. And Claire asks if he's talked to him, and he says not really. And Claire asks if he's going to see him later, and he says he doesn't know. It's weird over there. And the mom's all freaked. And when he said that, he kind of giggled, which was disgusting. He's a dick and gross. And
it is going to be weird over there.
yeah, like, no shit, you fucking idiot. And Claire says, yeah, well, what about Gabe? And he says, look, Morticia, I'm not interfering. It's too much to get into, you know? And Claire's like, I thought you were his friend. And Andy goes, why don't you fuck off, bitch, huh? If you're so worried, why don't you go fuck him again? Maybe that will cheer him up. Just like, come on. We didn't need you to get any more disgusting, but look at you go.
Mm-hmm.
And Claire says, nice. That's nice. By the way, Parker told me how one of your testicles is super small, like a peanut. And she said that in front of this whole lunch table of other teenagers. And she just walks away. Icon behavior as usual.
Yes. My thought was, oh, high school. Because let's be real, if that happened to somebody now, it wouldn't be embarrassing. It wouldn't be like,
Literally, Gen Z would just be like, oh,
yeah, I mean,
form a
at
support group.
at our house, like if something like that,
Oh.
you know, it's just interesting
to
to
us,
see
yeah.
the things that would embarrass you in high school.
Right. Yeah. And then at your birthday party, we're
Manifest.
talking about our labias.
Yeah, we were. The sizes and the beauties and
Right.
all of the labias.
But fuck it. Good. I'm glad he was embarrassed. He needed to be embarrassed. That was ew. And just perfection in the delivery from Claire.
And I think my point to my note too was, if you have a freakishly small testicle, it's not anything to be embarrassed about.
Right.
Although
That
I
is
don't
true.
like Andy.
Yeah. So we can laugh at him. But that is true. I agree. Then we see David take out a tablet of ecstasy from his pocket and put it into the Tylenol jar in the kitchen because Ruth walks in and startles him and he's stressed.
Who does that, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I had anxiety
You could
watching
have just put it in your pocket. Like, what are you doing?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen Reddit threads of people debating this too, or like, what the fuck, David? But that's what he did. And he's so uptight that he just like doing dumb shit because he's so stressed. Then we see Claire smoking a cig with Parker McKenna outside of the school on the stairs, and Parker tells Claire she's in dangerous territory because Gabe is a dick. She's sorry his brother is dead, but don't think that means he's not a dick. Claire says that she's worried about Gabe, and Parker says if you hook up with him now, it's going to be like total emotional rape. Whatever he feels for you is going to be wrapped up in some guilt, grief, fuck fest. You
I
better
don't believe that either.
She says you better stay away from that shit. I'm not kidding. So here's my question for you. Do you think that she's trying to protect Claire or trying to prevent her from hooking up with Gabe because she's either jealous or doesn't want them to hook up for whatever other reason, like because she wants to control Claire or something?
You took the words right out of my mouth. She
All of the above,
wants to have, no, it was the control. She wants to have control over Claire, and it doesn't even matter what it is.
Yeah.
It's just, there's got to be something. So she saw an opportunity to
Manipulate.
yes. And I think she has a thing for Claire because Claire is not easily manipulated by her.
And she's her own
she's
person.
got a talent. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good way to say that. I thought it was really hard because all of the logic in my brain is telling me exactly what you're saying. But seeing Claire have a girlfriend like this
Makes you happy.
It makes me happy. So I was wanting to feel like it was a true heartfelt moment, but you know that there's something deeper and weirder because it's Parker.
I think it could be, I think that relationship between them could exist in a world where Claire was fully aware, which I think she is too.
Yeah, that's the piece that makes me like, because she is aware
that Parker's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think that
and she still makes her own decisions. It's not like she doesn't really let Parker control her. So I feel like maybe honestly in a weird twisted way, it is kind of like a
relationship,
relationship because
a consensual mind fuck relationship.
It's like Parker's trying to manipulate Claire, but Claire's not affected by it, but still chooses to engage with Parker because there's this weird companionship of kind of being outcasts in their own weird ways.
Yes.
So it's very interesting and complex, but I do like their friendship weirdly. But yeah, that was an interesting to think about. Brenda is driving Nate around and tells him that they're going to pretend to purchase a funeral so they can study other funeral homes and how they do their business. She's like, come on, it'll be fun.
I loved it too. And it is. It's genius. It's something different. It's adventurous. And it turns out to be
beneficial.
Impactful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's so funny you say that, because that is such a you thing that you would be like, that's such a good idea.
Pissed I didn't think of it.
It was interesting for sure. So Claire walks into Gabe's house looking for him and sees Mrs. Demas sitting on the couch smoking cigarettes. She's kind of in a catatonic state almost and doesn't really respond to Claire when she asks if Gabe is home. So Claire just turns around and leaves.
Yeah. And at this point, I'm thinking I've got some questions here. Whose fucking gun was this? Like, we didn't know at this point. It's 22 minutes into the episode. We have no idea whose gun this is. Why is this mom sitting by herself in this very depressing living room?
Yeah.
Let alone the child being deceased. That living room itself needs a whole facelift. Where is the dad? How come nobody said anything about dad? This is just... Everything about this scenario is sad.
You want more information. Like, why is this their situation?
And you know what else I want to point out right now? That scenario that I just painted for you guys, these things happen in other kinds of scenarios. These things happen in houses that don't look or feel that depressed. They happen in beautiful homes with happy other people living there.
Yeah.
So
it's not just a poverty thing.
This is not a poverty thing.
It affects everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So we really quickly, like super, super quick, like 2 seconds, see David prepping a body. And I wrote, what do you think the point of this scene was? LOL. Because I didn't even realize who he had been working on. Because earlier he was working on some guy who had a heart attack.
And this was different.
Yeah, this was, he was like kind of filing the nails of the body. But I'll just throw it in here because later on I wrote it down in a note. But this was Anthony that he was working on. And I think that they showed us these little
how do we know that?
Clips there. I put it together later on and it's in my notes. I don't remember exactly what tipped me off.
Anthony, the boy.
The boy. So he was prepping Anthony's body and they just showed you a really quick little blip of David as he's working on Anthony's body, very gently filing his fingernails. And the look on David's face is, I mean, it's not happy. So I think that just feeds into my
findings,
speculation that he was super fucked up by this death and probably doesn't know how to even express that or maybe even realize it himself, because this has been his life. He does this. He doesn't easily get shaken by death, but it just drives home the point how horrific it is when a child dies. Then Brenda and Nate are sitting in a random funeral home and Nate is trying to convince Brenda that they should leave before the person gets there. And Brenda tells him to not be so left-brained. And the person walks in and Brenda pretends she's grieving. She tells the man that her parents were killed that morning in an accident. Nate is clearly uncomfortable. Brenda goes over the top and says, there was a helicopter and an explosion. And she goes on a rant and starts screaming at the top of her lungs, what's the point of living? And the man says, can I suggest matching caskets? And Brenda, on a dime, immediately stops acting and is like, that's it? That's what you have to offer me in my time of grief? Merchandise? Let's go. We have nothing to learn here. And Nate is just dumbfounded, looking like a lost puppy.
Yeah, I think he's like, okay,
yeah,
this is what's going to happen now.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah, exactly. And Ruth and Hiram are in the kitchen packing for their camping trip. Ruth is stressing about making sure that they have everything. Hiram is just really excited and trying to get her to be excited too. And then Claire walks in early from school and says she has a headache, and she goes and takes a pill from the Tylenol bottle.
And I'm thinking it's the fucking ecstasy.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll find out later. Then Ruth tells her that they're going camping and she'll be back tomorrow. And Hiram says, oh, it's a very beautiful time of year. Why is every word that comes out of Hiram's mouth so fucking adorable?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, he gets on my nerves a little bit.
He's almost too cheesy, but it's like,
he's like so innocent.
He's so pure. He's like too pure.
Yeah, I would never want to fuck him. But he's a great friend.
I think Ruth is starting to feel the same way.
Yep. She's going to friend zone him.
Then I also thought it was interesting there that Ruth and Hiram were both kind of like acting like they were almost like making excuses for why they were going camping. Like,
yeah.
It's a beautiful time of year, blah, blah, blah. And Claire just does not give a fuck. She's like, okay, well, have fun.
I think that Ruth still feels like she can't, I don't know. She says that I remember when she's like, I had an affair. Like she came out and said all of the things. I think she still hasn't digested those words herself.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's these little things that
she feels still guilty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's kind of just manifesting its way out into the world.
So Claire says, okay, well, you two have fun. I thought that was cute that she didn't care and she's telling them to have fun. She just genuinely wants her mom to be happy, I think.
Yes.
And Ruth is sad because her children don't need her anymore, she says. And Hiram just wants to beat the traffic. And then Brenda and Nate are at another funeral home, and Nate is playing along more this time and asks how much for the spiel the guy just gave them. And Nate calls him out on his bullshit and walks out. He's like, oh, you're upcharging whatever percent, blah, blah, blah. Brenda.
The Titan, which we know is expensive.
Yes, the Titan. What was his name? Oh, God, I won't even try to remember, but episode 2 or something. So Brenda is very pleased that Nate is starting to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nate gets upset, though, about how he starts getting in his head again about how the business just swindles people. And he says he wishes he could be an asshole that doesn't care about people. And Brenda laughs. She's like, no, you don't.
I also loved this moment. This little exercise that Brenda has her and Nate going on is really, really good for Nate. I think it is really going to help him feel like he is actually doing good in the world by not having to swindle people like the other funeral home.
Yeah.
And he does it can be he's doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah. It's giving him perspective of how much he is needed.
And validating a lot of who he is.
Right. Yeah. So Claire walks out of the house and Gabe is just standing there in front of Claire's house with a bag in his arms, and it ends up being a bag of his brother's soccer clothes for him to be buried in. Claire helps him and tells him that she had stopped by his house. And he asks if she saw his mom, and she says, yeah. And then he talks about how she's like a zombie and just sits there and blames herself. And he says it's his fault. It wouldn't have happened if he was watching him. And we find out that they don't know where Anthony's dad is at this moment and that he was an ass who beat Gabe when he was around.
Which is on par for everything else that you would think this dad is like. Mm-hmm. And we figured out that Anthony's does have a dad.
Yes. And Gabe tells Claire he never thought it was funny when people used to call her names like Cemetery Girl and Vampire. And he says that he has to go and gives the bag to Claire and asks her to give it to her brother. And Claire tells him that he can call her if he needs to talk. And he says, okay, and leaves. So kind of still leaves them, I don't know. We don't really know 100% how either one is feeling yet at this point, but it's clear that there is love there.
Mm-hmm.
Then Ruth asks Hiram where they should hang the food. They're at their campsite now. And she walks up to him and she's like, where should we hang the food? While he's setting up the tent. And he's like, well, can't that wait till after dinner or something? And she's like, oh, we'll get eaten by a bear or blah, blah, blah. And Hiram tells Ruth that she needs to fucking relax. He didn't say fucking, but she needs to relax. And Ruth is clearly super uptight and stressing out.
Which makes me feel like it's like when she doesn't know what to do with her hands.
Yeah.
You know, she
has so much anxiety.
Yes.
So much anxiety.
It maybe at one point used to be their comfort place.
Yeah.
I think that
things
was a
were
lot
different
of the things.
then.
Yes. And now this is just everything's changed and she just doesn't know anymore.
Yeah.
She's confused.
For sure. So then Nate is at another funeral home and asks to make arrangements for a funeral. He says his wife is in the restroom and she'll be out in a minute. And the woman says, okay, can I ask who the funeral is for? Then Brenda walks out and says, it's for me. And she's made herself up to look like a cancer patient, clearly unbeknownst to Nate. Brenda is really milking it, and Nate starts getting upset with this interaction. He loses it and he says, this is too fucked up. I can't do this,
Which
Brenda.
also would work if that scenario was
with
real.
that scenario.
Yeah.
Yes, and it did work perfectly. So he gets up and storms out. He's like, I can't do it. And Brenda just keeps playing along with her role, and the woman thinks that he's just upset because he's upset that she's going to die, not because she's faking this whole thing.
And I'm dying laughing because of the cancer skit. And then Nate and her bitching back and forth in the car, and he's basically calling her crazy and goes, "What are you going to start barking at me now?" And she does.
Yes. Yes, because that was her thing that she did when she was a kid to the therapist, when that he was like fixated on earlier in the series, that she just barked at them. And so he's like, what the fuck? And Brenda told him that she wasn't trying to be funny and that he needs to not be so afraid of death. And then she barks at him. And I loved how they both laughed at that.
Yeah, it was a cute inside love moment.
Yeah. And it was like, I don't know, it's nice to see that like genuine, because that's how it is in genuine relationships with people. Like if you're arguing, and
you have to be able to know when to stop the argument.
Yeah. And
the
sometimes
points have been
even when
made.
you don't want to start the argument, that shit still happens where you laugh and it's like, I don't know.
And then it is the end of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that you don't want to. It seemed like there was too much heat to have this kind of a discussion right now anyways.
Yeah.
So the comedic relief was nice.
It was. It definitely nice to watch as a viewer, and it was also made it a very believable and real interaction. It didn't seem scripted, like it obviously it was because it's a TV show, but it just felt like a very genuine, relatable. That's how you kind of interact with people that you love, because you do argue with people that you love. Like that's just inevitable, and I'm sure anyone can relate to that.
Yeah.
So we see David putting the soccer clothes on Anthony. And I think the scene earlier, like I said, was
With
showing how distraught the death of this little boy is making David. And then David calls Kurt to see what he's doing that night. And Kurt's like, you. So then we see David looking for the ecstasy in the aspirin bottle. And Claire approaches him and asks him what he's looking for. And he says, aspirin. And she's like, well, I know it's in there. I took some earlier. And David is like, you did? Are you okay? And I thought that was really sweet the way he said it. He was like genuinely concerned about her. And Claire's like, yeah, why? And so we find out here
it wasn't Claire.
She did not end up taking the ecstasy. Luckily.
But the whole bottle is gone.
Yes. So
somebody took the bottle.
Somebody has it. David gets then skeptical, and he's like, you found it, didn't you? You found it and you kept it for yourself.
Like a little fiend. Like,
yes.
So does this make you, is he addicted? I'm so
no, I think that, no, I don't think it was that. I think he was just so stressed because he's trying to fit in and be cool with Kurt,
the young guy.
And then he lost this.
Yeah, didn't he say something about, now I'm going to have to show up and be like, I lost your pill because I'm a fucking idiot and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yes. Yeah, I think that was the source of the stress. So Claire's like,
probably isn't even that big of a deal.
Right. It wasn't. It wasn't. I think Kurt's line was, it's okay. You'll be my drug tonight. But Claire's asking David, like, what the hell is going on with you? And he's like, nothing. She's like, you're wearing my shirt, which was hilarious too. And then Claire sees that Kurt had pulled up to pick David up. And she's like, whoa, you're dating the square dancing guy? And she's laughing. And then David fesses up that he was looking for pills that Kurt had given him. And Claire's very amused. She says that she likes him this way better. Yep. And I thought that was a cute interaction.
Yeah, me too.
I love Claire and David. Then Ruth and Hiram are drinking champagne under the stars on their camping trip. And Ruth asks Hiram if he knew that you're not supposed to go camping when you're menstruating.
Menstruating.
That's how she pronounced it.
I was on the floor.
I was getting in my head about it because I was like, why is she saying it? Is that how you say it? But
I don't know.
Menstruating. So she proceeds to tell him that Nathaniel once buried a woman who had gone on a camping trip when she was menstruating and was attacked by a bear. Hiram is horrified and says, huh. Then he says, I'm glad we're seeing each other again. And Ruth's like, me too. It's nice. Hiram asks her what's wrong. Ruth clearly is distracted. Then she says she has a bit of a headache and takes some aspirin out of her pocket.
Okay. So, and here's my thoughts is women are fucked.
Yeah.
You can't be around men because you'll die. You can't go camping because you'll die. You can't go camping when you have your period because bears will kill women in their sleep when they're menstruating and will die. Yet, somehow, us women still choose the bear over men.
Every time.
Every fucking time. And then Ruth is definitely going to take that ecstasy.
We'll see.
She has like a 1 in... That thing was like half full. So like a 1 in 30 chance.
Playing the lottery.
Yeah. She won.
Yes. Very true. So more on that later. David and Kurt are back at the club again. We see Keith. Courtney's very excited about this.
I was very, very happy to see him again.
So when they see Keith, David starts freaking out and Keith approaches them. And Kurt's all excited because Keith's so hot and Kurt's a hornball. And he asks if, as he's approaching, he's like, oh, is he into three-ways? And they chat for a second. And then a man comes up and kisses Keith. And David asks how they met. And Keith says that Eddie is an EMT and they met on the job. David makes a really awkward, morbid joke and it does not land.
It was very, very weird.
Very uncomfortable. I don't even remember. I didn't even write down what he said because it was so cringe. But Kurt makes a very funny fit. He literally was like, "Ee." Like it was uncomfy. David was mortified. And then Kurt kind of insensitively says after they walk away, I bet they have great sex because they're a cop and a fireman. And he says he dated a cop once or something like that. So then David gets annoyed and says,
he interrupts him and says, is dating an excuse for you to figure out who you want to be when you grow up? And Kurt, without skipping a beat, says, I don't know, is dating like an excuse for you to see who you wished you would have been when you were my age? Love that. Because let's be real, whatever Kurt is doing right now, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
He is having fun. He is making lighthearted jokes. He's talking about intimate moments and he's not attached emotionally to as David is. And David's having a hard time separating that. So it comes at him as it's Kurt being insensitive.
yeah.
Which he's not. He's
No.
just literally he's young.
He's comfortable with who he is.
Yes, his sexuality is very open and he is...
Which it really is everything that Dave wishes
he could be.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So then David kisses him, and which I thought was interesting because right after they have that little like bitchiness,
Yep.
then David just kisses him and they're making out hot and heavy. But while they're making
Which
out,
that was solidifying the fact that it is everything that
is attracted to David.
Yes.
To see that. Yeah. But they're making out and David's eyes are looking like scanning the crowd for Keith while he's kissing Kurt.
Which he didn't find right away, right?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay.
I think he was just obsessing. So then we see really quickly Ruth chugging water in the tent, which I wrote here, did she take the ecstasy when she took her aspirin?
Uh-huh.
And if you paid attention in drug education, you know that ecstasy makes you thirsty.
I did not know that.
So back at the club again, Kurt gives David cocaine this time. And Keith sees this from across the room and tells Eddie, let's get out of here. He's obviously upset to see David doing drugs. Kind of lame of Keith, I wrote. David and Kurt take their shirts off and they're dancing all freaky. It was intense.
Yes, Keith seeing David doing some more of the drugs. I can actually totally see how that would be uncomfortable for him on many levels. And I think with the one, obviously, Keith being a cop, seeing illegal, illicit drugs. But yeah, you're right. Lame as fuck. But you can totally relate. Also, I think it was uncomfortable for Keith to see David in this light that he didn't really get to see David in. Because when they were dating, David was still so much more reserved. Like, he has a long way to go, but he's come a long way.
Yeah. Do you think it's because he's jealous that he didn't get that version of David, or is it because he's seeing that and he knows that's not truly who David is?
Or he's seeing that and he thinks that's not truly who David is, but now he's second guessing himself and he's confused. Should we go deeper?
That was good ping pong there.
Yeah. It is
And
one of those.
I didn't think about that at all until you were just saying that either. But yeah, when I first watched through, I was just like, Get fucking over it, Keith. You're at a club in probably West Hollywood.
They're
And
at the
it's a
Pink
gay
Pony Club.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. Let's pretend they are. Okay. So
Yep.
we both wrote the exact fucking same thing for this scene. Yep.
Ruth took the X.
So Ruth definitely took the ecstasy. She's wandering around the wilderness, looking at the leaves on the trees.
We see a bear.
All mesmerized. And then I wrote here too, unless maybe she's dreaming, I can't remember, but no, she took the X. So David must have left the 2 ecstasy tablets in the Tylenol bottle, because I remember something that happens in a future episode related to this. So there must be more than one in there, is all I'm going to say. So all we saw so far was Ruth. She's literally like a little fairy in the woods, like going around touching the trees, like, oh.
Just loving it.
Yes.
Loving the thing.
I wanted to be her in that moment. It looked so fun. But once again, back at the club, David sees Kurt making out with another guy, and Kurt waves him over, invites him to join them. And David gets freaked out and walks away. Kurt follows David, and David asks him, who was that guy? And Kurt's like, it's just a guy I know. He wants to come home with us. He's a total fuck machine, he says. David says no, and Kurt asks, why not? Why are you taking this so seriously? David says, because I'm a serious guy and I bury people for a living. And he tells Kurt to go and have fun. He's sorry that he can't. And he turns and leaves, and Kurt goes back to the other guy.
There's so much going on. Like, David probably wanted to. I bet that is a fantasy of there was so much going on in my head. As a sex coach, I talk and coach a lot of people with fantasies and kinks, and especially a threesome.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talk about is fantasies are so normal. All of this stuff is so normal, and it's really liberating to talk about, and eventually maybe act upon them. But some people don't understand that you don't actually have to act upon the fantasy. And what I saw here was David thinking that he had always wanted this fantasy, and then having it right here in his hand, and then either all of the exterior things surrounding it made him turn inward, or he realized it was okay being a fantasy. It was okay to just live that as a fantasy rather than fulfill it. So that was one of the things going on through my head. The other was that Kurt is so sexually unapologetic and confident in who he is that he didn't. I loved this. I hated it, because if I was in David's position, I would have been pissed. But he was like, okay, well, if that's not you, then I'm going to stay here with this guy.
Yeah.
Like,
there was no attachment. It was like a healthy
split,
like friends with benefits situation almost that they had going.
Kurt had impeccable boundaries.
Yeah.
And he stayed true to his boundaries and has been very transparent.
And was good. Ultimately was the best thing for him to do, even for David in that moment, because it wouldn't have done either of them any favors if he would have
followed David back home.
Yeah, just to like try to make him feel better just for his sake. Like I think that's a very good point, that it was important that he stayed true to himself there. It was the best thing for both of them. That's also a really interesting perspective that you explained from the fantasy standpoint. Because I think we did see David having a lot of really intense sexual fantasies, and it's interesting now to kind of
episodes even
to start see some of these come to fruition and see what he's actually comfortable with or willing to actually act upon. So then Nate and Brenda are lying in bed, and Nate tells Brenda, that really spooked me. And Brenda's like, what? The idea of me dying? And Nate's like, well, yeah. Which was so dopey the way he said that, but sweet. Like, it was a cute interaction. And Brenda says, I will die someday. We die, Nate. We all die.
Okay, and remember this quote for the end of the episode. Just wait.
Okay. Then she kisses him, and Nate is clearly having some dark existential thoughts.
It can get dark thinking about stuff like that, especially if somebody that you love. And clearly this death of this boy is really fucking up so many people.
Yeah, for sure. It's sending everyone. Yeah. Here's another long-winded. You're okay. This is my voice to text that I'm just going to power through here. But okay, back to Ruth tripping in the woods. She's deaf tripping. She sees Smokey the bear in the woods and says
another
hello.
bear theme.
Interesting. He's holding a ticking timer and points at it, and she follows him through the woods. They start running. She comes across Nathaniel's hearse in the middle of the woods. She opens it, and he comes out from underneath as though he had been working on it like a mechanic. He says, "You certainly took your sweet time getting here." And she says, "You'll ruin that shirt." And he's like, "Who cares?" Then Ruth caresses his cheek, and he teases her again and says, "What, are you hitting on me now, you slut?" And which I actually I don't like when men call women sluts, so I thought that was kind of gross. But anyway, Ruth laughs and she's like, "Oh dear, I suppose I owe you an apology." And he's like, "Why? I'm dead." And she's like, "Yes, but I was seeing Hiram before you." And he says, "I was gone long before I died." And she says, "You would like Hiram. He makes me laugh." And Nathaniel says, "Oh, blah, blah, blah. I've got my money on the florist." And Ruth laughs and is like, "Oh, heavens no, Nathaniel, that man is a complete savage." And he said, which I also don't think you can say that word anymore either. But Nathaniel says, "Ding, ding, ding. It's so cute the way they're interacting. They exchange fond memories of making love and all that." And then Ruth says, "Nathaniel, what happened to us? We were so in love once." And he says, "Life happened to us. I buried hundreds of people and we watched each other grow old." Ruth says, "We were such children when we met, and we watched those children disappear." Nathaniel goes back to working on the hearse and lifts the hood of the car, and Ruth goes to brush away the leaves under the hood, and she's like, "Well, these can't be helping." Then as she brushes them away, underneath she uncovers hers and Nathaniel's gravestones, headstones, hers without a death date, obviously. And Nathaniel says to her, "No tears." And Ruth says, "I miss what we had." And he says, "So find it again." And then they kiss. And this kiss was not just like a smooch. It was like the most passionate kiss that we've seen on the show so far.
I wanted to make a comment about when was the last time that they had this beautiful of an interaction, do you think? Because I think it was long before he died.
Oh, yeah.
So I just thought, oh, wow, this is interesting. And as a married woman, it did drink me back into some things. Like I felt some feels.
Yeah, it's
there.
really interesting to see how they illustrate Ruth and Nathaniel's ability to, or just their connection, the connection that you will inevitably have with somebody when you share so many years of your life with them, your home, children, a family. They're so intertwined in your soul that even though they had been so distanced for so long prior to Nathaniel dying, they still have this inherent connection that is like a source of comfort for Ruth. And she's kind of drawing on that to inform her decisions now. But it's kind of beautiful to see her experiencing this in a positive way.
Yeah. It's a thought process that she had to go through all the other things to get to.
Yeah. So Ruth wakes up in the tent naked with leaves in her hair. So it was not just a dream. Hiram's humming while making them breakfast outside the tent. So Ruth comes out and she's so happy. She's like, "What a beautiful day. You should have woken me up." Hiram says, "I thought you could use the sleep after the night we had. You've never been that passionate with me before. Thank you for a wonderful night." And he kisses her and Ruth is like, "Huh?" But she starts laughing, and when she realizes like what she doesn't know that she took ecstasy, which is so funny.
Oh my God, I just put that together in my head.
She has no idea. She thinks, I mean, when she first woke up, I think she thought it was all a dream, but then she was realizing, oh, there's leaves in my hair. I woke up naked. I'm in a great mood. We must have had killer sex last night. So she's cracking up laughing because it's absurd, but they're happy, and that was just really cute.
Oh my God.
Best case scenario.
Yes. Definitely. And after this morning, I was like, okay, so this X trip has to be like shrooms, which I have taken, and I have psychedelically had all of the things, and everything just felt really good.
Yeah.
You know, and the next morning you feel so happy. So I didn't even relate her happiness that like, oh, it's a beautiful day, to the sex that she had. I was relating it to the after effects of a shroom trip, which I don't know, because David woke up with a hangover from his.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think her.
It's like
happiness
euphoria
is from the sex,
when you wake up after shrooms, the next actually few days, you have this like euphoric view of the world.
And I mean, shrooms are used by
Medicinal.
for like depression and stuff.
And so I have microdose shrooms as a anxiety.
Treatment.
Yep. Which you don't get any effects from because it's very, very micro. But I've also macro dosed it to get the other effects.
Yeah.
So
it was very interesting to think of our own experiences with these things and compare. So at Anthony's service, David is ushering guests and Nate approaches him. David compliments his suit, which was nice. And Nate says he figures he needs more than one suit if he's going to be a funeral director. And David says, you have to pass a test first. And Nate's like, you just can't let go of that, can you? And David here admits to Nate that he also failed the first time that he took the funeral license exam. And Nate doesn't believe him at first, but David insists and he says, I fuck up a lot more than you might think. I fuck up a lot.
Admitting to failing that test the first time that he took it was very admirable. And it was also kind of annoying. Like, I'm glad
like you've been a dick this whole time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that was his apology, which kind of irritated me a little bit.
I get that.
All in all, a great scene.
Yes. I think you're right. I think he's starting to accept that Nate is trying. I mean, going and buying he does need more suits. He complimented his suit. He looks nice. He's acknowledging that. He's doing things. He's trying, but
did he brush his hair?
David or Nate?
Nate.
I don't know. I think it was just the style in like 2001, but like I hated it. But okay, this thought just popped into my head as I read this out loud. When David says, I fuck up a lot more than you might think. I fuck up a lot. I bet he's thinking about Keith. Because
there was definitely an underlying meaning.
Yeah.
And it could be related to that. Statement. And maybe his guilt of Keith.
Also putting ecstasy for the whole family to just play Russian roulette with in the aspirin bottle. But that's a minor in comparison to probably what's taking up most of his consciousness.
I don't know. If I accidentally took an ecstasy pill and had to like drive my kid to school something, I would be livid.
It could be a great time, or if you have to do something like that, it could be a disaster.
Exactly.
But I think he's in his head thinking about, because the night before
to something without
he had
seen
or he had that thing with Kurt and Keith and whatever. So yeah, it was a scene. I love the sweet sibling.
Because I forget now, they broke up because
David was not willing to come out to his congregation. I believe
he was okay. I'm so sorry that you just brought that up. Now I'm irritated. How come we haven't been talking about this church that David was so into?
Yeah, they really
in a while
jumped on that storyline for a while. I'm sure it will come back at some point, but they were hot and heavy with that.
Yes,
and then
it caused a lot of issues and
with him and Keith, and now it's not even being a thing.
Yes,
but maybe that's the reason why they're not focusing in on it, because it's not a source of
contention
of drama anymore, because he's just doing it and he doesn't have he doesn't have Keith there anymore to make it relevant. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know.
That's just me explaining away for Ellen Ball. Ellen Ball, we got questions, as always. What happened to the deaconship? So then we see Claire watching Gabe from across the room at his brother's service. And Gabe sees her and gets up and walks over to her. And she asks him how he's holding up. And he says he's okay, but it's just weird. He asks her why she's been being so nice to him. But before she can answer, a man grabs Gabe's shoulders and is like, you little bastard. And Gabe says, Sam, I just so happened to pause at this very part because I was trying to get the timestamp for it. And I loved Gabe's shit-eating grin on his face when he turned around and he's like, Sam, we didn't think you'd show. And he's laughing, and then Sam punches Gabe in the face and starts really beating on Gabe, kicking him in the stomach while he's on the ground, yelling that he's going to kill him, calling him a useless fuck. Then Nate pulls Sam off of Gabe, and Sam screams at Gabe, "You probably wasted out of your mind, whacking off, let my kid shoot himself." And then Claire screams, What?
You gonna blame him? Where were you for the past 2 years? I just realized something too. Probably wasted out of your mind, whacking off, let my kid shoot himself. This is not a blame on Gabe.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that there's already so much hurt going on to now,
He's projecting.
yeah, like, hello, this poor Gabe doesn't, it's a very traumatic scenario, and yelling and placing blame at people and acting out like that is not helpful.
No, yeah, it's so rough. It's so hard. I felt so bad for Gabe, and he's literally getting the shit beat out of him at his brother's funeral. Ugh. So Gabe is bleeding. He walks out, and Sam wriggles free from Nate, and he tells him to take it easy. David asks, "Is everything all right?" And Nate's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll deal with it." And David is like, "Thank you." And I feel like that was a real genuine thank you, because what in the actual fuck would David do without Nate there in that moment? Let's pretend Nate went back to Seattle after episode 1.
Is he still wearing Claire's shirt?
Seriously, but like what the fuck would
terrible.
happen? And Rico's gone. Nobody would be there to diffuse the situation. So David, this had to be a really strong moment for David, realizing how much he actually needs Nate's partnership in this. So anyway, David says thank you. That was almost kind of a funny moment. Nate puts his arm around Sam, and Sam just shakes him off, and we see them next in the calming room where they take people who are freaking out. And Sam asks Nate, "Who the fuck was that little bitch out there?" And Nate's like, "That was my sister." And Sam's like, "Well, you should warn her. Gabriel has been a fuck up his whole life." And he goes on about Gabe. And Sam admits to Nate that it was his gun, Sam's gun, that killed Anthony. And he explains that he bought it for Vicky, the mom, because he was going to leave for a while for a job. So you can see Nate start to feel empathy towards Sam. And then Sam starts to freak out again, and Nate loses his patience with him, and he repeats to Sam what Brenda said to him earlier. I did write this in. Okay, so this is what you're saying. Everybody dies. It's just a fact of nature, pal. You can punch as many people as you want. It's not going to change the fact that that boy is dead and your chance to be in his life is over. And he says, your own life is a ticking clock too. Everybody says, and just walks out. Then Sam sits down and it's like, what the fuck?
Harsh was my thought.
Yeah, it's almost showing. I mean, I almost feel a little tinge of empathy for Sam in this moment, because he bought this gun essentially to protect them.
Mm-hmm. That's why people buy guns.
Yeah, doesn't work like that. You gotta be there with.
Yes, and
put it somewhere safe.
Yes. Oh my God. I don't even know what to say.
But just the thought behind it, that the intent behind the gun was not like a gang related thing. It wasn't like look at this cool gun I have. It was a normal thought. It was like genuine. I'm getting this so that they have protection here, but obviously careless and dangerous, not being managed appropriately.
A baseball bat would have been a better idea.
Yeah. But just sad to see him go through that realization, and he's actively like working through the stages of grief.
Yes, and he feels guilt too. So that's where his projection on everybody else is, and he has to blame Gabe because he feels like it is at his fault. Yeah. Everybody there probably feels that on some way, shape, or form.
Which it's almost understandable.
Yes. Yep. And they probably all should feel that for a minute.
Yeah.
Yes, I would feel like
you'd want to if somebody dies, you want to blame someone. Like that's just natural. Somebody has to pay. It's why we have the fucking
judicial system.
Yeah, exactly. Like that is just inherent. But he's going through these stages, and it's honestly, if we're gonna play devil's advocate here for a second, Gabe is kind of a dick. Like we so far, all we've known him to be is a huge asshole. So it kind of validates Sam's perspective here. I clearly, if you've listened to the beginning of this episode, you know how I don't actually feel that way in my heart. But when you are looking at it objectively or subjectively, it's like you get it. You get where he's coming from.
They all are right.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all wrong.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think it's, I mean, true. It's very important, though, that they know that they all are right and they all can be right. They also have to accept the other rights of other people, even when that puts them in the wrong. Yes.
Yeah.
Like it's tricky.
For sure. Yeah. That was harsh. I really thought that Nate was going to be more I thought I saw him like soften towards Sam,
Yes.
but then Sam started going off again, and Nate's just like, fuck you, dude. Like, didn't have it.
Right. That's Nate like knew what he needed to say.
Yeah, it was a good scene.
Huh.
So then David walks into the kitchen and Ruth is unpacking from the camping trip and he asks if she had a good time. She says, "Oh, David, you must go camping. It's so spectacular up there right now." Goes on and on about how beautiful it was. David is worried that she took the ecstasy. So he asks, "You're okay? No headaches?" And she says, "No, I had one on the trip, but I took some aspirin and it just disappeared." And David then realizes that she took the ecstasy, but she doesn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
No harm, no foul, I think is what's going through his head.
Yes, because they did not mention it again.
Right. And Ruth asks David how the service was, and he tells her about the fight that broke out and that he let Nate take care of it. And she says she's so glad that they're working so well together now.
I loved that.
That was very sweet. And then Claire walks in and Ruth tells her, "Oh, you look terrible." And Claire explains that Anthony was her friend's brother.
Mm-hmm.
And Ruth is like, "Oh, I had no idea that you were his friend." And David and Ruth look at her very concerned, and a second goes by and she's like, "Yeah, he's the foot guy." And David was like, "Oh my God." So funny. I loved that part.
A lot of wheels turning and then they clicked for a second.
Yeah. Oh my God. So literally though, like if you just sit and think about that, that's so full circle and amazing. And then Claire's just like, "Yeah, good night."
And Ruth and David are just sitting there and Ruth goes, "There's so much you wish you could protect your children from." And if that is not the epitome of parenting, I don't know what it is. Like, it almost painful sometimes trying to protect your children from everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a constant thing that goes in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can relate.
Yes.
So then David gives Ruth a kiss and says goodnight, which I thought, again, very sweet. I love all the familial sweetness going on with the Fishers. This felt like a really heartfelt moment. And then Ruth places the bottle of aspirin on the table. And then last scene, we see Claire comforting Gabe in her bedroom as he's crying on her bed. And then I wrote down, thinking back to when she was in the kitchen, she did grab 2 water bottles out of the fridge. So just like a quick little connection that she was harboring Gabe, which I don't think anybody would really care that much, but it was
She probably just didn't want to have a conversation.
Right. And why would you? Yeah. But so she's just comforting him. He's literally just laying on her bed sobbing and she's like rubbing his back. Heart-wrenching. But it makes me love them. Like I want them to be there for each other.
Yeah. He needs that for sure. Oh,
okay. We're already
good idea on the options this time.
Yeah, I was trying to make us a little speedier here. Mate date, cremate.
Who's the funeral home guy too?
The swindler guy who tried to upcharge them, and because he was the only one that was like kind of interesting out of the 3 of them.
Okay, I do think Andy and Sam.
I was gonna say Eddie, but I feel like we should save him because we get to know him better.
Okay,
and we have barely met him
funeral
yet.
guy too.
Okay, so our options are Andy, Gabe's friend, Sam, Anthony's dad, or funeral home guy 2, the swindler.
Okay, mate date cremate. I am going to mate the swindler. I'm gonna date. Okay, hold on. I'll date Sam and I'll cremate Andy.
Why are you gonna mate funeral home guy?
Because I don't like any of the other ones and I need to have a connection. So there's probably a better chance I'll have a connection with that guy.
Okay. Why did you choose date
Sam?
I
do see some.
He's gonna just run off and you'll get to be alone.
Actually, that sounds even better. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay.
And then I just want to cremate Andy because he's just not helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely must also, I'm going to go backwards, I guess, but I'm cremating Andy because he's just the most repulsive character we've seen so far. I'll give him an ounce of credit for the fact that he's just a teenager and most people are horrible when they're teenagers. But yeah, I just don't like him. He's a dick. He's not nice to Gabe. He's not nice to Claire. He's not nice to anybody and he's gross. And he has a tiny testicle apparently, but we're not going to hate on that. And okay, so I'm going, I guess, to mate Sam
Okay.
because he probably, I mean, he's here for a good time, not for a long time. And,
I like that one.
funeral home guy too, I'm going to marry because he clearly knows how to bring in the bacon. So
Good.
keep up my
That's
lifestyle.
a way better answer than mine.
No, yours was good. It's logical.
Yeah, okay. Which is not usually my MO. My MVP this round is actually Kurt.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
For
It seems
sure.
like he brought in some.
He was a necessary guide to get David from one point to another in his journey.
Yep, and he didn't sway from he was authentically himself the whole
Yeah.
time, and I think that's very admirable.
And a good
And
model for
not
David.
in a usual younger man.
Yeah.
So I think it's even more astounding to me.
The fact that he was younger, but still we know that he was a established person. He's empathetic. He knew who he was. He had a career and a life for himself, but he also had a really fun side where he likes to party and have sex and do drugs. He can do it all and he's happy about it and he's proud of himself, and he's showing David that you can be all of these things. You can be a social worker who cares about the elderly, but also do ecstasy at the club and fuck whoever you want.
Yes, because like we said earlier, what did Billy say? A man is what he does.
Yeah, which is not, you can't put someone in a box like that.
You don't. Nobody puts Kurt in a box. Let me just say that.
Agreed. And David can take from that, oh, I can be gay and a deacon at the church. I can be gay and X, Y, or Z. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't need to put himself in a box. And I think that's why he got Kurt.
Yes.
Cool.
I love that.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week
for episode 10.
Make sure to comment, like, and share.
Yep. Subscribe, rate, 5 stars, please.
Yep.
And hopefully this time we will get the audio and the video right.
Yeah. Let us know if this is our best round yet.
Fingers fucking crossed. We love you.
Love you too.
Mwah.
Bye.